The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the rolling plains of the Double Eagle Ranch, painting the grasslands in shades of amber and gold. Samuel "Big Sam" McKinnon stood on the wraparound porch of his sprawling ranch house, a cup of black coffee cooling in his weathered hands. At 52, he was a man carved from the very landscape he owned, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver threading through his dark beard and eyes the color of storm clouds. The Double Eagle was his kingdom, spanning over 30,000 acres of prime Montana grazing land. His Hereford cattle dotted the horizon like scattered rust-colored stones, and his name commanded respect from Billings to Great Falls. Yet tonight, something felt different. The wind carried an unusual stillness, as if the very air was holding its breath. "Mr. McKinnon, sir?" Sam turned to see Miguel Vasquez, his foreman, approaching with his characteristic measured gait. The Mexican had been with him for 15 years, ever since Sam had found him half dead from thirst near the Canadian border. Miguel's loyalty was absolute, his judgment sound. "What is it, Miguel?" Dust cloud on the eastern ridge. Single rider but moving strange, like they're hurt or, Miguel squinted against the dying light, or carrying something heavy. Sam set down his coffee and reached for the brass telescope he kept mounted on the porch rail. Through the lens he could make out a figure stumbling more than walking, each step deliberate but unsteady. As the shape drew closer, details emerged that made his breath catch in his throat. It wasn't a rider at all. It was a young woman, maybe 17 or 18, her dress torn and filthy, dark hair hanging in matted strands around her face. She moved with the desperate determination of someone who had pushed beyond all reasonable limits, yet somehow kept going. "Jesus," Sam muttered, lowering the telescope. "Miguel, saddle thunder. Now." "Si, patron." Miguel had already seen enough to understand the urgency. Sam vaulted from the porch with surprising agility for a man his size, his boots hitting the packed earth with purpose. By the time Miguel brought his black stallion around, Sam was already checking his sidearm, old habits from his younger, more dangerous days. They rode hard across the open ground, the thunder of hooves echoing across the valley. As they closed the distance, Sam could see the girl more clearly. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears. Her clothes, what remained of them, spoke of days in the wilderness, but it was her eyes that struck him most. Fierce, determined, haunted by something that went deeper than mere exhaustion. She saw them coming and stopped walking, swaying slightly as if the act of standing still might topple her. When Sam drew rein 20 feet away, she straightened with visible effort, lifting her chin in a gesture of defiance that reminded him of someone he'd rather forget. "Easy there, miss," Sam said, dismounting slowly. "You're safe now." The girl's voice, when it came, was hoarse from thirst and barely above a whisper. "I walked 3 days, just to reach your ranch." Miguel exchanged glances with Sam. 3 days on foot through this country meant crossing through Crow territory, surviving without proper shelter or supplies, and avoiding the various unsavory characters who haunted the back trails. For a young woman alone, it should have been impossible. "Why?" Sam asked, studying her face for clues. "What's so important that you'd risk your life getting here?" The girl's legs finally gave out, and she sank to her knees in the dust, but her eyes never left his face. "Because you're the only one who can help me find my father." Sam felt the world tilt slightly. "Your father?" "Thomas Brennan," she whispered. "He worked for you 15 years ago before he disappeared." The name hit Sam like a physical blow. Thomas Brennan, his former partner, the man who'd helped him build the Double Eagle from nothing. The man who'd betrayed him in the worst possible way and vanished into the night with everything Sam had trusted him with, including Sam's wife. Miguel noticed Sam's reaction immediately. "Patron?" Sam's jaw worked silently for several seconds before he found his voice. "Get her inside. Now. Hot bath, clean clothes, food." He paused, his eyes never leaving the girl's face. "And Miguel?" "Not a word about this to anyone, not yet." As Miguel helped the girl to her feet, Sam caught her arm gently. "What's your name, child?" "Rebecca," she said, leaning heavily on Miguel's support. "Rebecca Brennan, and Mr. McKinnon, there's something else you need to know. My father didn't just disappear, he was taken, and the men who took him, they're coming for you next." The sun dipped below the horizon as they made their way back to the ranch house, casting the world into shadow, but Sam barely noticed the darkness gathering around them. His mind was spinning backward through time, to a night 15 years ago when his world had burned to the ground, and the two people he'd trusted most had vanished like smoke. Now one of their ghosts had walked back into his life, bringing news that could change everything. Inside the ranch house, the warmth from the massive stone fireplace couldn't chase away the chill that had settled in Sam's bones. He sat in his leather chair, staring into the flames while Miguel's wife, Rosa, tended to Rebecca upstairs. The sound of running water and quiet feminine voices drifted down through the floorboards, but Sam's attention was fixed on memories he'd spent 15 years trying to bury. Thomas Brennan had been more than a business partner. He'd been Sam's closest friend, the brother he'd never had. Together, they'd carved the Double Eagle out of raw wilderness, fighting off claim jumpers, rustlers, and hostile tribes. Thomas had been Sam's best man when he married Catherine, had been godfather to their stillborn son. And then, one night in the autumn of 1868, Sam had come home early from a cattle drive to find his house empty, his safe cleaned out, and a note from Catherine explaining that she and Thomas had fallen in love and were starting a new life together somewhere far away. The betrayal had nearly destroyed him. For months, Sam had raged and searched, hiring private detectives and following false leads across 3 territories. But Thomas and Catherine had vanished as completely as if the earth had swallowed them whole. Eventually, Sam had accepted that they were gone forever and had buried his pain in work, building the Double Eagle into the largest ranch in Montana Territory. Mr. McKinnon? Sam looked up to see Rebecca standing in the doorway, transformed by Rosa's ministrations. Clean and dressed in one of Rosa's daughter's dresses, with her dark hair brushed and braided, she looked heartbreakingly young and vulnerable. But her green eyes, Thomas's eyes, held a steel that spoke of inner strength forged by hardship. "Sit down, child," Sam said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Rosa, bring us some coffee and whatever food you can manage." "Si, Senor McKinnon." Rosa bustled away, leaving them alone in the flickering firelight. Rebecca settled into the chair with careful movements as if her body was still protesting the punishment she'd put it through. "I know what you're thinking," she said quietly. "That my father was a thief and a betrayer, that he ran off with your wife and your money." Sam's expression didn't change. "Is that what he told you?" "He never had the chance to tell me anything," Rebecca replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I was 3 years old when he disappeared. I barely remember him, but I remember her." "Catherine?" "My mother, yes. She raised me alone in a cabin outside Denver, working as a seamstress to keep us fed. She never spoke badly of him, Mr. McKinnon. Even when we went to bed hungry, even when the creditors came calling, she never said a harsh word about Thomas Brennan." Sam leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Then what happened to them? Where has he been all these years?" Tears glistened in Rebecca's eyes, but her voice remained steady. "Mother died of consumption 2 years ago. Before she passed, she made me promise to find him. She said there were things I needed to know, secrets that could only be told by him. She gave me a letter, his last letter to her, with clues about where he might have gone." She reached into the pocket of her borrowed dress and pulled out a worn envelope, yellowed with age. "The trail led me to a mining camp in the Rockies, then to a logging outfit in Oregon, then to a cattle ranch in Wyoming. Each place I found people who remembered him, but he'd always moved on just before I arrived, like someone was warning him I was coming." Sam studied the envelope without taking it. "And that trail led you here?" "To Silver Creek, 20 miles south of here. The postmaster there said a man matching my father's description had been asking about the Double Eagle Ranch, about you specifically. But when I got to Silver Creek," Rebecca's composure finally cracked, and a sob escaped her throat. "The whole town was burned to the ground. Fresh burned maybe a week ago. I found bodies, Mr. McKinnon, men, women, children, all dead. The blood in Sam's veins turned to ice water." "What did you see?" "I searched every building that was still standing looking for survivors or clues. In what was left of the saloon I found this." She pulled a second item from her pocket, a silver pocket watch, its surface blackened by smoke but still recognizable. Sam's hands shook slightly as he took the watch and opened it. Inside the cover was an inscription he knew by heart. "To Thomas, true partnership never dies. SM." He'd given Thomas that watch on their 5th anniversary as business partners. It had been a symbol of trust and brotherhood. "There's more," Rebecca whispered. "I found wagon tracks leading away from the town, heading north toward your ranch. And I found bodies that had been tortured before they were killed. Someone was looking for information, Mr. McKinnon, about my father, about you." Sam closed the watch with a sharp snap, his mind racing. Silver Creek was a small but thriving community, home to about 200 people. If Rebecca was telling the truth, then whoever was behind this was willing to commit mass murder to get what they wanted. "How many men?" he asked tersely. "The tracks suggest maybe 15 to 20 riders, well-armed, disciplined. They cleaned out the bank and the general store, but they left the silver mine untouched. This wasn't about money." Sam stood and walked to the window, staring out into the darkness. Somewhere out there, a gang of killers was making their way toward his ranch, and they were asking questions about Thomas Brennan. But what could they want after all these years? What secret was worth murdering an entire town to protect? "Rebecca," he said without turning around, "tell me about your mother's letter. What exactly did your father write to her?" "Most of it was personal. Declarations of love, promises to send for us when he could. But there was one passage that never made sense to me until now." She unfolded the letter with trembling fingers. He wrote, "The gold is hidden where the eagle soars highest, where only God and the dead can see. If anything happens to me, tell our daughter that McKinnon knows the truth. Even if he doesn't know, he knows it." Sam turned sharply. "Gold? What gold?" "I don't know. Mother always insisted that we were poor because father had run off with another woman, not because he was hiding treasure. But now," she gestured helplessly, "now I think she was protecting me from something dangerous enough that an entire town had to die to keep it secret." A cold wind rattled the windows, and Sam felt the familiar prickle between his shoulder blades that had kept him alive through countless dangerous situations. They were being watched. He was certain of it. "Miguel!" he called sharply. His foreman appeared in the doorway immediately, as if he'd been waiting nearby. "See, Patron? Double the night watch. Send riders to check the perimeter, but tell them to stay in pairs and avoid skylining themselves on the ridges. And Miguel, break out the rifles. All of them." Miguel's weathered face showed no surprise. In his years working for Sam McKinnon, he'd learned to trust the man's instincts completely. "How many men are we expecting? 20? Maybe more. Professional killers, not rustlers or drifters." Sam's voice carried the authority of a man who'd commanded soldiers in the Civil War. "They'll likely hit us just before dawn when our guard is lowest. Make sure the boys know this isn't about stealing cattle." As Miguel hurried away to organize the ranch's defenses, Sam returned his attention to Rebecca. The young woman was watching him with a mixture of fear and admiration, as if she was seeing him clearly for the first time. "You believe me?" she said. "It wasn't a question. I believe someone burned Silver Creek to the ground, and I believe they're coming here next. Whether they're looking for your father or for some mythical gold doesn't matter right now. What matters is keeping you safe and protecting my people." "But the gold isn't mythical," Rebecca said quietly. "I think I know where it is." Chapter 2. Secrets Beneath the Surface. The first gray light of dawn was seeping through the windows when Sam found Rebecca in the kitchen, fully dressed and pacing like a caged animal. She'd barely slept, and neither had he. The anticipated attack hadn't come during the night, which worried him more than if it had. Professional killers didn't abandon their plans without good reason. "Coffee's fresh," Rosa said, bustling between the stove and the table where she was laying out a hearty breakfast. "You both need to eat. Cannot fight on empty stomachs." Sam poured 2 cups of the strong black coffee and handed one to Rebecca. "You said you think you know where the gold is hidden?" Rebecca wrapped her hands around the warm mug, grateful for both the heat and the steadying ritual. "After I found the watch in Silver Creek, I spent hours thinking about my father's letter, where the eagle soars highest, where only God and the dead can see. At first I thought it meant some mountain peak, but then I realized, this is the Double Eagle Ranch. Lot of high places on 30,000 acres, Sam observed, but only one place that fits both conditions." Rebecca's eyes met his across the table. "Your family cemetery. It's on the highest hill on the ranch, isn't it? Where your son is buried." Sam's cup stopped halfway to his lips. The cemetery sat on Eagle's Peak, the highest point on his property, with a commanding view of the entire valley. It was where he'd buried his stillborn son, where he'd planned to bury Catherine when her time came, where he expected to be laid to rest himself someday. "That's sacred ground," he said quietly. "I know, and I'm sorry, but think about it. When did my father disappear? Right after your son's funeral, wasn't it? When the ground was already disturbed, when no one would think to look there again for months or even years?" Sam set down his coffee with careful control, his mind racing backward through time. Little Samuel McKinnon had been born 3 weeks early in September of 1868, lived for 6 days, then quietly slipped away in his sleep. The funeral had been small and private, just Sam, Catherine, Thomas, and the preacher. They'd buried the tiny coffin on Eagle's Peak on a gray, windswept afternoon, with Catherine sobbing against Thomas's shoulder, while Sam stood alone, too numb with grief to cry. 3 days later, Sam had left for an emergency cattle drive to Dodge City. When he'd returned 2 weeks later, Catherine and Thomas were gone. "Son of a bitch," Sam breathed, the pieces finally clicking into place. "What is it?" Rebecca leaned forward anxiously. "Your father wasn't stealing from me when he disappeared," Sam said slowly. "He was hiding something from someone else, something valuable enough to kill for." Before Rebecca could respond, the thunder of hoofbeats outside announced the arrival of several riders. Sam was on his feet instantly, his hand moving to the Colt .45 on his hip, but Miguel's voice calling out in Spanish relaxed him slightly. "Riders coming from the south," Miguel announced as he entered the kitchen. "Maybe a dozen men, armed and moving fast. They'll be here within the hour." Sam's jaw tightened. "How'd they get past our sentries?" "They didn't come through our land, Patron. They're following the old mining road that skirts the eastern boundary, staying just outside our property line, but close enough to watch our movements." "Smart," Sam admitted grudgingly. "Professional." He turned to Rebecca. "These the same men who burned Silver Creek?" Rebecca moved to the window and peered through the curtains toward the distant dust cloud. Even at this distance, she could make out the disciplined formation of the riders, the way they moved with military precision, rather than the loose, chaotic style of common outlaws. "I think so," she said. "The leader, there was something about the way he sat his horse. Very straight, very controlled, like he used to be cavalry." "A lot of former soldiers turned to less honest work after the war," Sam observed. "Miguel, how many men can we put in the field?" 12, counting you and me. Good men. All of them know how to handle rifles. But if these strangers are professionals, we'll make do." Sam's mind was already working through defensive strategies. "Pull everyone back to the main house and the bunkhouse. Create crossfire lanes, but keep the men under cover. And Miguel, send someone to get Sheriff Patterson from Butte. Tell him we're expecting trouble." "Si, Patron." Miguel paused at the doorway. "What about the señorita?" Sam looked at Rebecca, who was still watching the approaching riders with a mixture of fear and determination. "Rebecca, I want you to stay in the house with Rosa. Keep away from the windows and—" "No." Rebecca's voice was firm. "Those men killed everyone in Silver Creek looking for information about my father. I'm not hiding while they threaten the people who helped me. This isn't a game, girl. These are killers. I know exactly what they are." Rebecca turned from the window, and Sam saw that her green eyes held a hardness that hadn't been there the night before. "I saw what they did to the women and children in Silver Creek. I saw how they tortured people for information. I'm not going to cower in a closet while they do the same thing here." Sam studied her face, seeing something of Thomas's stubborn courage and something else, a steel forged by loss and hardship that reminded him of the frontier women who'd helped build this country. "Can you shoot?" "My mother taught me. We lived alone for 15 years, Mr. McKinnon. A woman learns to protect herself or she doesn't survive." "All right." Sam made his decision. "Rosa, get the Winchester from my study and a box of shells. Rebecca, you'll stay with me and do exactly what I tell you when I tell you. Understood?" "Understood." As Rosa hurried away to fetch the rifle, Sam moved to his gun cabinet and began selecting weapons. The approaching riders had slowed their pace, probably studying the ranch's defenses and looking for weaknesses. They'd be here soon, and when they arrived, they'd want answers about Thomas Brennan and his hidden gold. Sam intended to give them answers, all right, just not the ones they expected. 20 minutes later, Sam stood on his front porch with Rebecca beside him, both armed and ready. The approaching riders had finally crested the low hill that marked the entrance to the Double Eagle's main compound, and Sam could see them clearly now. A dozen men, all well armed and mounted on good horses. Their leader was exactly as Rebecca had described, a tall, lean man with military bearing and cold, calculating eyes. The riders approached at a walk, their weapons visible but not immediately threatening. A show of force rather than an outright attack. The leader raised his hand when they were 50 yards out, bringing his men to a halt in a loose semicircle that blocked any easy escape from the ranch yard. "Samuel McKinnon," the leader called out. "I'm Colonel James Hardwick, formerly of the Union Army. I'd like to have a word with you about an old friend." Sam kept his expression neutral, but inwardly he was impressed. Hardwick, he'd heard that name before, associated with some of the shadier government operations during the final years of the war. A man who specialized in making problems disappear. "Speak your piece, Colonel," Sam replied, "but keep your hands where I can see them." Hardwick smiled, but there was no warmth in it. 15 years ago, you had a business partner named Thomas Brennan. He disappeared rather suddenly, along with some property that didn't belong to him. I'm here to collect that property." "Thomas Brennan stole my money and ran off with my wife," Sam said flatly. "If you're looking for payment from him, you're 15 years too late." "Oh, I'm not looking for payment, McKinnon. I'm looking for something much more valuable than money." Hardwick's gaze shifted to Rebecca, and Sam saw recognition flicker in the man's cold eyes. "Something that Mr. Brennan stole from the United States government during a very sensitive operation in Colorado Territory." Rebecca stepped forward slightly, her rifle held ready but not yet aimed. "What operation?" Hardwick's smile widened. "Why, Miss Brennan, how delightful to finally meet you. Your father was part of a special cavalry unit tasked with recovering Confederate gold that had been hidden in the Colorado mountains. A very successful operation, I might add. Unfortunately, your father decided to keep some of that gold for himself." The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place in Sam's mind. "How much gold are we talking about, Colonel?" "Approximately $50,000 in gold coins and bars. Enough to fund a small war, or to set a man up for life in some distant territory where questions aren't asked." Hardwick leaned forward in his saddle. "Now I'm going to ask you once very politely to turn over both the gold and Miss Brennan. Do that and my men and I will ride away and never trouble you again. And if I refuse?" Hardwick's pleasant mask slipped, revealing the ruthless killer beneath. "Then you'll suffer the same fate as the good people of Silver Creek, I assure you, Mr. McKinnon. I have no qualms about killing innocent people to achieve my objectives." Sam felt Rebecca tense beside him, and he could sense Miguel and his other men taking aim from their concealed positions around the yard. The next few seconds would determine whether this ended in negotiation or bloodshed. "I'll need some time to consider your offer, Colonel," Sam said carefully. "Of course. You have until sunset to produce the gold and the girl. If you haven't made the right decision by then." Hardwick gestured casually toward his men. "Well, let's just say that burning buildings light up the night sky quite beautifully." With that ominous promise hanging in the air, Hardwick wheeled his horse around and led his men back toward the ridge, leaving Sam and Rebecca alone on the porch with the weight of an impossible choice. "He's not going to wait until sunset," Rebecca said quietly. "Men like him don't negotiate. They were just studying our defenses, counting our men." Sam nodded grimly. "Which means we have maybe 2 hours before they hit us with everything they've got." He turned to look at her seriously. "Rebecca, I need to ask you something, and I need the truth. Do you really think the gold is buried in my family cemetery?" "I think it's the only place that makes sense," she replied. "But Mr. McKinnon, even if we find it, even if we give it to them, they're still going to kill us. We know too much about what they did in Silver Creek. Then we'd better make sure they don't get the chance." Sam's eyes hardened with resolve. "Miguel," his foreman appeared from behind the corner of the house, moving with the swift, silent grace that had made him invaluable during the Apache Wars. "Si, Patron? How long to ride to Eagle's Peak and back?" 30 minutes, maybe less if we push the horses hard." Sam made his decision. "Saddle 3 horses. We're going to dig up some answers." Chapter 3, Unearthing the Past. The ride to Eagle's Peak took them through some of the most beautiful country in Montana Territory. Rolling grasslands gave way to rocky foothills dotted with stands of pine and aspen, their autumn leaves creating a tapestry of gold and crimson against the deep blue sky. Under normal circumstances, Sam would have taken time to appreciate the view. Today he could think of nothing but the ticking clock that measured the time until Hardwick's patience ran out. Rebecca rode between Sam and Miguel, handling her borrowed horse with the natural ease of someone raised on the frontier. She'd insisted on coming despite Sam's objections, arguing that she might recognize something about the burial site that would help them locate the gold more quickly. "Tell me about the day of the funeral," she said as they climbed the winding trail toward the peak. "Everything you can remember." Sam's jaw tightened at the painful memories, but he forced himself to focus on the details that might matter. It was a gray day, threatening rain but never quite delivering. Catherine couldn't stop crying, so Thomas helped her while he paused, struggling with emotions he'd buried for 15 years, while I carried the coffin myself. Wouldn't let anyone else touch it. Who else was there? Just the 4 of us and Preacher Morrison. We kept it private. Catherine wasn't up for a big gathering, and I didn't want curious neighbors trampling all over the burial site. Miguel spoke up from behind them. "Patron, forgive me, but I remember that day. You were gone to Dodge City just 3 days later, and Senor Brennan was acting very strange, nervous, like he was expecting trouble." "What kind of trouble?" Rebecca asked. "I don't know, senorita, but he kept watching the horizon, like he was waiting for riders, and he spent a lot of time up on Eagle's Peak saying he was paying respects to little Samuel. But," Miguel hesitated. "But what?" Sam's voice carried a sharp edge. "But he was carrying a shovel, patron, every time." The implications of that statement hung heavy in the air as they crested the final rise. Eagle's Peak spread out before them, a windswept plateau maybe 100 yards across with the cemetery occupying the highest point. Sam had chosen this spot not just for its commanding view of the valley, but because it felt closer to heaven, closer to God, and the peace his son deserved. The small cemetery was enclosed by a wrought iron fence that Sam had imported from Chicago at considerable expense. Inside, 3 headstones marked the graves. Little Samuel's tiny marker, and the larger stone Sam had erected for his own parents, whose bodies lay in a cemetery back in Ohio, but whose memories he wanted to keep close. Rebecca dismounted and walked slowly to the fence, her eyes studying every detail of the layout. "Mr. McKinnon, when you buried your son, how deep did you dig?" "Standard depth, 6 feet. Sam's voice was husky with emotion. "I wanted to do it myself, wouldn't let Thomas or Miguel help. Took me most of the day. And the grave was covered with—" Rebecca knelt beside the small headstone, examining the disturbed earth around its base. "River rocks, heavy ones to keep the coyotes away." Sam frowned as he noticed what Rebecca had seen. "But those aren't the same rocks I placed there." Miguel moved closer, his experienced eye reading the subtle signs that most people would miss. "Patron, this grave has been opened and resealed. Recently, too, within the last month or 2. Sam felt his world tilt once again. Someone had violated his son's resting place, had desecrated the most sacred spot in his personal world. The fury that rose in his chest was white-hot and all-consuming. "Who would dare?" he whispered. "Someone desperate enough to risk your anger," Rebecca said gently. "Someone who knew the gold was here and was finally ready to claim it." She stood up, brushing dirt from her knees. "Mr. McKinnon, I think my father has been back. I think he's been watching your ranch." waiting for the right moment to retrieve what he hid here 15 years ago. Then where is he now? Sam's voice carried a mixture of hope and dread. Before Rebecca could answer, the sharp crack of a rifle shot echoed across the valley below them. Then another and another, followed by the unmistakable sound of men shouting and horses screaming. Miguel had his spyglass out instantly, scanning the area around the ranch buildings. Dios mío, he breathed. They're attacking the ranch. The colonel, he did not wait for sunset. Sam snatched the spyglass and focused it on his home. Through the lens, he could see Hardwick's men moving with military precision, using the outbuildings for cover as they advanced on the main house. Smoke was already rising from the barn, and he could see muzzle flashes from the windows of the ranch house where his loyal employees were making their stand. "We have to get back," Sam said, moving toward his horse. "Wait," Rebecca's voice stopped him. "Mr. McKinnon, if we go back now, we'll be riding into a trap." Hardwick left men positioned along the trail. "I can see them from here. They're expecting us to panic and come running." Sam looked where she was pointing and cursed under his breath. She was right. At least 3 riders were positioned to ambush anyone returning from Eagle's Peak. "Then what do you suggest?" he asked tightly. Rebecca was quiet for a moment, staring down at the tiny grave at her feet. When she spoke, her voice was filled with quiet determination. "I suggest we find that gold and use it to save your people. But first, we need to know the whole truth about what my father did 15 years ago." She knelt beside the headstone again and began carefully moving the river rocks that covered the grave. "Help me," she said. "If I'm right, we're going to find more than just disturbed earth." Sam hesitated for just a moment. The thought of opening his son's grave felt like the worst kind of violation. But the sound of gunfire drifting up from the valley reminded him that the people he cared about were dying while he wrestled with sentiment. Together, the 3 of them quickly cleared the rocks from the small grave. Underneath, as Miguel had suspected, the earth showed clear signs of recent disturbance. Someone had indeed opened this grave and resealed it, trying to hide their work, but not quite managing to match the settled appearance of undisturbed ground. "Miguel, start digging," Sam ordered, his voice thick with emotions he couldn't name. "Patron, are you sure? Do it. Fast." Miguel's shovel bit into the loose earth with grim efficiency. Within minutes, he'd opened a hole nearly 3 feet deep and struck something that wasn't wood or bone. "Metal," he announced, scraping dirt away with his hands. "Something wrapped in canvas." Together, they pulled the package from the grave. It was about the size of a small trunk, wrapped in oilcloth that had protected it from moisture and decay. Sam's hands shook slightly as he untied the ropes that held the wrapping in place. Inside, gleaming in the afternoon sun, were gold coins and small ingots arranged in neat rows. More gold than Sam had ever seen in one place. Easily worth the $50,000 Hardwick had mentioned. Probably more. But there was something else in the package. A leather journal, its pages yellowed but still readable. Sam opened it with trembling fingers and found himself looking at Thomas Brennan's handwriting. "Sam," he read aloud, "if you're reading this, then something has gone wrong and I didn't live to explain everything to you in person. By now you must hate me and I don't blame you. But before you judge me completely, please read what I'm about to tell you. Your life may depend on it." Rebecca moved closer, her eyes fixed on the journal. "Keep reading." Sam's voice grew stronger as he continued. "The gold you found was stolen from a Confederate supply train in Colorado Territory in 1867. I was part of a special cavalry unit under the command of then Major James Hardwick, tasked with intercepting enemy supplies and preventing them from reaching Confederate forces in New Mexico. We were successful, too successful as it turned out." "My God," Miguel breathed. "The colonel, he was there from the beginning." Sam continued reading. Hardwick decided that the war was nearly over, and that 50,000 in Confederate gold would be better served lining the pockets of loyal Union soldiers than sitting in some government vault. He planned to divide it among our unit and disappear into civilian life, but I couldn't go through with it, Sam. I couldn't become a thief no matter how the crime was justified. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears as the truth about her father began to emerge. He was trying to do the right thing. More than that, Sam said, reading ahead quickly. He was trying to protect us all. Listen to this. I took the gold not to steal it, but to prevent Hardwick from using it to fund something far worse than simple theft. Through contacts in Washington, I'd learned that he was planning to use the money to finance a private army of former Confederate soldiers, men who couldn't accept the war's end. He intended to continue the fight through guerrilla warfare, terrorism, and assassination. I couldn't let that happen. The pieces of the 15-year-old puzzle were finally falling into place. Thomas Brennan hadn't been a traitor or a thief. He'd been trying to prevent a much greater crime. But why didn't he turn Hardwick into the authorities? Rebecca asked. Sam found the answer several pages deeper in the journal. Because Hardwick had powerful friends in Washington, men who were profiting from Reconstruction contracts and didn't want their own corruption exposed. Thomas knew that if he tried to go through official channels, he'd end up dead, and the gold would disappear anyway. So he stole it himself, Miguel concluded, to keep it out of Hardwick's hands. And he's been running ever since, Sam realized. Hardwick has been hunting him for 15 years using government resources and private mercenaries. That's why Thomas could never settle down, never contact Rebecca or Catherine directly. He was protecting them by staying away. The sound of gunfire from the valley grew more intense, and smoke was beginning to rise from multiple buildings now. Sam could see tiny figures moving around the ranch compound, but he was too far away to tell who was winning the battle. "There's more," Rebecca said, pointing to the final pages of the journal. "Look at this." Sam read the last entry, dated just 2 weeks ago. "If something happens to me, if Hardwick finally catches up, the gold must be returned to the U.S. Treasury through legitimate channels. Contact General Philip Sheridan in Chicago. He's the only man in the government I trust to handle this properly. Tell him the Colorado gold has been found and is ready for return. He'll know what to do. But there's something else," Rebecca said softly. "Something he wrote just for you, Mr. McKinnon." Sam found the personal note tucked between the last pages. His hands trembled as he read Thomas's final message to his old friend. "Sam, I know you must hate Catherine and me for what we did to you. I know how our disappearance must have looked, and I'm sorrier than I can ever express for the pain we caused. But I want you to know the truth. Catherine never betrayed you. She came with me not as my lover, but as my partner in keeping this secret. She knew that Hardwick would use her against me if she stayed, so she agreed to disappear and help me protect the gold. We were never anything more than friends, Sam. She loved you until the day she died, and she made me promise that if anything happened to us, I would make sure you knew the truth." The words hit Sam like a physical blow. Catherine hadn't betrayed him. She'd sacrificed her own happiness, her own life with the man she loved, to help prevent a greater evil. "She loved you," Rebecca whispered, tears streaming down her face. "My mother loved my father, but Catherine loved you. Mother told me so before she died. She said Catherine spent 15 years mourning the life she'd given up to protect you and everyone else." Sam closed the journal, his vision blurred by tears he'd held back for a decade and a half. Everything he'd believed, all the hatred and bitterness he'd carried, had been based on a lie he'd told himself because the truth was too complicated to accept. "Where is your father now?" he asked quietly. "I don't know, but Mr. McKinnon, I think he's trying to return the gold before Hardwick kills him. I think that's why he opened the grave. He was preparing to turn it all over to the proper authorities." A new sound from the valley caught their attention, the rumble of many hooves moving fast. Miguel raised his spyglass again and cursed in rapid Spanish. "What is it?" Sam demanded. "More riders, Patron. Coming from the east, maybe 20 or 30 men. But these are not with Hardwick. They're wearing U.S. cavalry uniforms." Sam felt a spark of hope. "Federal troops?" "See, and they're moving to surround the ranch buildings. Hardwick's men, they are caught between the soldiers and our boys in the house." Rebecca suddenly gripped Sam's arm. "Mr. McKinnon, look, there's someone else coming up the trail." Sam turned and saw a lone rider approaching Eagle's Peak from the north, moving carefully but steadily up the winding path. Even at a distance, there was something familiar about the way the man sat his horse, something that made Sam's heart pound with impossible hope. "Thomas," he breathed. The rider was indeed Thomas Brennan, aged and weathered by 15 years of running and hiding, but unmistakably the man who had once been Sam's closest friend. He rode slowly toward the cemetery, his hands visible and empty, his eyes fixed on Sam with an expression of profound sorrow and desperate hope. When he was 20 yards away, Thomas dismounted and walked the rest of the way, removing his hat as he approached the grave where Sam, Rebecca, and Miguel waited with the recovered gold. "Hello, Sam," Thomas said quietly. "I see you found my secret." For a long moment, the two men simply stared at each other across 15 years of pain, betrayal, and misunderstanding. Then Sam stepped forward and, to everyone's surprise, extended his hand. "Hello, Thomas," he said. "I think it's time we had a talk." Chapter 4, Redemption's Price. The reunion between the two old friends was interrupted by the intensifying sound of battle from the valley below. Through Miguel's spyglass, they could see that the arrival of federal cavalry had turned the tide decisively against Hardwick's mercenaries. Several buildings were burning, but the disciplined soldiers were systematically surrounding and capturing the attackers. "How did the cavalry know to come here?" Sam asked, never taking his eyes off Thomas. "I contacted General Sheridan 2 weeks ago," Thomas replied, his voice hoarse with exhaustion and emotion. "When I learned that Hardwick had finally tracked me to this area, I knew I had to act fast. I arranged to meet the general's men here today to turn over the gold and my testimony about Hardwick's crimes." Rebecca stepped closer to her father, studying his face with a mixture of love and accusation. "Why didn't you contact me? Why didn't you let me know you were alive all these years?" Thomas's composure cracked, and Sam could see the weight of 15 years of guilt and loneliness in his old friend's eyes. Because every day I stayed hidden was another day you and your mother lived safely. Hardwick would have used you against me without hesitation. He would have tortured you both to make me give up the gold's location. But Mother died believing you'd abandoned us, Rebecca said, her voice breaking. She died poor and alone, working herself to death to keep us fed. I know. Thomas's voice was barely above a whisper. I sent money when I could, through intermediaries, but I could never risk direct contact. And I know that doesn't make up for not being there when she needed me, when you needed me. Sam found himself in the unexpected position of defending the man who had caused him so much pain. He did what he thought was right, Rebecca. He protected you the only way he knew how. Did he? Rebecca's anger flared suddenly. Did he protect Catherine? Where is she, Father? Where's the woman who gave up everything to help you? Thomas closed his eyes, and Sam saw him age 10 years in that moment. Catherine died 3 years ago. Fever, in a small town in Oregon where she was working as a school teacher. I couldn't even attend her funeral. Too dangerous. The words hit Sam like a physical blow. Catherine was dead. The woman he'd loved, the woman who had sacrificed her life to protect him and countless others, was gone forever. He would never have the chance to tell her that he understood, that he forgave her, that he had never stopped loving her. She left something for you, Thomas said quietly, reaching into his saddlebags. A letter. She made me promise to deliver it if we ever met again. Sam took the sealed envelope with trembling hands. His name was written on the outside in Catherine's familiar handwriting, and just seeing those careful loops and curves brought back a flood of memories. Read it later, Thomas advised gently, when you have privacy and time to process what she wanted to say. A new sound from the valley caught their attention. A single rider approaching fast, waving a white flag. Miguel focused his spyglass on the approaching figure. It's one of the cavalry officers, he reported, coming alone, under a flag of truce. They want to negotiate, Sam realized. Probably want to collect the gold and take statements about Hardwick's crimes. Thomas nodded grimly. General Sheridan was very specific about wanting Hardwick taken alive if possible. The man knows too much about corruption in Washington. There are a lot of powerful people who want him silenced permanently rather than put on trial. The cavalry officer reached the base of Eagle's Peak and began the winding climb to the cemetery. As he drew closer, Sam could see that he was a young lieutenant, probably in his mid-20s, with the kind of earnest, honest face that suggested he was one of the good ones. Mr. McKinnon, the officer called out as he dismounted. Lieutenant Andrew Morrison, 5th Cavalry, under orders from General Sheridan. I'm here to collect evidence and witnesses regarding a matter of stolen government property. Morrison? Sam studied the young man's face more carefully. Any relation to Preacher Morrison? His grandson, sir. He told me to give you his regards and to say that he's been praying for this day to come. Lieutenant Morrison's expression grew more serious. Mr. McKinnon, we have the situation at your ranch well in hand. Most of Hardwick's men have surrendered and we've captured several alive, but Hardwick himself escaped during the fighting. Thomas cursed under his breath. He'll run again, disappear into Mexico or Canada, and we'll never find him. Actually, sir, I don't think he's running. Morrison looked troubled. According to the prisoners we've taken, Hardwick was obsessed with recovering the gold personally. He's convinced that without it, his enemies in Washington will eventually track him down and kill him. The gold represents his only chance at disappearing completely. Sam understood immediately. He's coming here to Eagle's Peak. That would be my assessment, yes, sir. And he won't be alone. Our scouts report at least 6 men with him, probably his most loyal and dangerous followers. Morrison checked his pocket watch. They'll likely approach under cover of darkness, try to take you by surprise. Rebecca moved closer to her father. How long do we have? Sunsets in 2 hours, Miguel observed. If they're smart, they'll wait for full dark. Maybe 3 hours, maybe 4. Lieutenant Morrison cleared his throat respectfully. Sir, with your permission, I'd like to station a squad of cavalry here to provide protection. General Sheridan was very clear that all witnesses to this affair must be kept safe. No, Thomas said firmly. If Hardwick sees federal troops, he'll disappear back into the wilderness and we'll never get another chance at him. He has to believe he still has a chance of success. Sam studied his old friend's face, recognizing the same stubborn courage that had made Thomas such a valuable partner in the early days of building the Double Eagle. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time to end this once and for all. Thomas gestured toward the recovered gold. Hardwick wants this treasure badly enough to murder an entire town for it. Let's give him exactly what he wants. A trap, Rebecca realized. You want to use the gold as bait. Not just the gold, Thomas corrected. Me. Hardwick's been hunting me for 15 years. He won't be able to resist the chance to settle the score personally. Lieutenant Morrison looked uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Sir, I have orders to bring you in safely for debriefing and testimony. I can't allow you to— Lieutenant, Sam interrupted quietly. How many people died in Silver Creek? Nearly 200, sir. Men, women, children, all murdered in cold blood. And how many more will die if Hardwick escapes to continue his war? Thomas asked. How many innocent people will suffer while he rebuilds his private army with new funding and new recruits? Morrison was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with conflicting duties. Finally, he sighed. What do you need from me? Position your men where they can observe but not interfere, Thomas said. When Hardwick makes his move, when he has the gold and thinks he's won, then you move in, but not before. He has to believe he succeeded, or he'll bolt again. And what about Rebecca? Sam asked. I won't have her put at risk. I'm not going anywhere, Rebecca said firmly. This is my fight too. Those people in Silver Creek died because they were trying to help me find my father. I owe them justice. Sam looked at the young woman, barely more than a girl really, and saw the same steel that had carried her 3 days through hostile territory to reach his ranch. She'd earned the right to see this through. All right, he said finally, but we do this smart. No unnecessary risks, no heroic gestures. We end Hardwick's war tonight, and we all walk away alive. As Lieutenant Morrison rode back down the trail to position his men, Sam found himself alone with Thomas and Rebecca for the first time in 15 years. The silence stretched between them, heavy with years of pain and misunderstanding. Sam, Thomas began. About Catherine? Don't. Sam held up his hand. Not yet. Let me read her letter first. Let me understand everything before we talk about what happened. Thomas nodded, respecting his old friend's need for privacy. There's something else, though. Something you need to know before Hardwick gets here. What? Thomas pulled a second item from his saddlebags. A small leather pouch that clinked softly with the sound of metal on metal. Bullets. Special bullets made from melted Confederate silver. Hardwick is superstitious about dying. He believes that only silver can kill him permanently. Sam stared at the pouch. You're serious? Dead serious. I've been carrying these for 15 years, waiting for the chance to use them. Hardwick may be crazy, but he's not stupid. He wears a vest made from melted gold coins. Regular bullets won't penetrate it. But silver will? Silver will. And Sam? Thomas's eyes met his friend's steadily. When the time comes when you have a clear shot, don't hesitate. Don't try to wound him or take him alive. Kill him quickly and cleanly, or he'll kill all of us. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across Eagle's Peak, Sam loaded his Colt .45 with Thomas's silver bullets and tried to prepare himself for the confrontation that would finally end 15 years of running, hiding, and pain. Somewhere in the darkness gathering around them, James Hardwick was coming for his gold, and this time, one way or another, the hunt would end. Chapter 5. The final stand night fell across Eagle's Peak like a heavy curtain, bringing with it a cold wind that whispered through the pine trees and rattled the iron fence around the small cemetery. Sam, Thomas, and Rebecca had arranged themselves in a defensive triangle around little Samuel's grave, where the recovered gold gleamed dully in the moonlight. They'd been waiting for 2 hours when Miguel's soft whistle announced the approach of armed men. Sam counted at least 7 distinct sets of footsteps moving through the darkness with military precision. Hardwick and his remaining loyalists, coming for their final confrontation. Remember, Thomas whispered, let them think they've won. Let Hardwick get close enough to gloat. That's when he'll be most vulnerable. Rebecca checked her Winchester one final time, her young face set with grim determination. What if he doesn't take the bait? What if he just kills us from a distance and takes the gold? He won't, Sam said with quiet certainty. Men like Hardwick need to feel superior. He'll want to explain how clever he's been, how inevitable this victory was. Pride will be his downfall. A voice called out from the darkness beyond the cemetery fence, Hardwick's cultured tones carrying clearly in the still night air. Thomas Brennan, I know you're up there. 15 years is a long time to run, my old friend. Aren't you tired yet? Thomas stood slowly, his hands visible and apparently empty, though Sam knew he had a derringer concealed in his vest pocket. I'm here, Colonel, and I have what you want. The gold? Hardwick's voice moved closer, though he remained hidden in the shadows beyond the fence. All of it. Exactly as we took it from that Confederate supply train in Colorado. Thomas gestured toward the open grave. I kept it safe for you, just like you asked. Did you really? Hardwick emerged from the darkness, flanked by 6 hard-faced men with rifles at the ready. Or did you spend 15 years trying to figure out how to keep it for yourself? Even in the dim moonlight, Sam could see that the years had not been kind to James Hardwick. The man was thinner than before, his face gaunt and marked by the paranoia that came from decades of looking over his shoulder. But his eyes still held the cold intelligence that had made him so dangerous. The gold's all here, Thomas repeated. Take it and go. Our business is finished. Hardwick laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Oh, Thomas, After everything we've been through, do you really think I'm going to let you walk away? You cost me 15 years of my life. You destroyed my plans, scattered my men, forced me to live like a fugitive. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? I think you're a madman who's been living in the past for too long, Thomas replied steadily. The war is over, Colonel. It's been over for nearly 20 years. Whatever cause you thought you were fighting for died at Appomattox. The cause never dies. Hardwick's mask of civility slipped, revealing the fanatic underneath. The South will rise again, Thomas. It just needs the right leadership, the right funding. 50,000 in gold will buy a lot of loyalty, a lot of weapons, a lot of useful chaos. Sam felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Even after all these years, Hardwick was still planning to use the Confederate gold to fund terrorism and rebellion. Thomas had been right to keep it away from him. You're insane, Rebecca said, stepping forward with her rifle held ready. The people of Silver Creek died for this madness? Hardwick's attention shifted to her, and Sam saw recognition and calculation in the colonel's cold eyes. Ah, the lovely Miss Brennan, Thomas's daughter, if I'm not mistaken. You have your father's eyes and, unfortunately, his stubborn streak. Those people were innocent, Rebecca pressed. They had nothing to do with your war. Everyone has something to do with my war, girl. Everyone is either a patriot or a traitor, an ally or an enemy. There is no middle ground. Hardwick's voice carried the zealot's absolute certainty. The people of Silver Creek chose to help you find your father. That made them my enemies. You're a monster, Sam said quietly, finally revealing himself. Hardwick spun toward him, momentarily surprised by the presence of a fourth person. Samuel McKinnon, how delightful. I was wondering when you'd make your appearance. Tell me, how does it feel to learn that your beloved wife spent 15 years living in exile rather than in your bed? Sam felt Thomas tense beside him, but he kept his voice level. It feels like she was a better person than either of us deserved. How touching. A reunion of old friends united in their sentimental foolishness. Hardwick gestured to his men, who spread out in a semicircle that blocked any escape from the cemetery. I'm going to kill you all, of course. But first, I want to savor this moment. 15 years of hunting, 15 years of staying one step behind, and finally, I have Thomas Brennan exactly where I want him. You have me, Thomas agreed. Now take the gold and finish this. Oh, I'll take the gold, but I won't finish this quickly. Hardwick drew his sidearm, a nickel-plated Colt that gleamed in the moonlight. You see, Thomas, I've had a lot of time to think about what I wanted to do to you when I finally caught up. A lot of time to plan exactly how you would die. Colonel Hardwick. The shout came from the darkness beyond the cemetery, followed immediately by the sound of multiple rifles being cocked. Lieutenant Morrison's voice carried clearly across the peak. You are surrounded by soldiers of the United States Army. Lay down your weapons and surrender. Hardwick cursed viciously, his head swiveling as he tried to locate the hidden cavalry. You set me up, Thomas. You brought the army here.